I'm Joyce Hornady. You might say accuracy is my business. I make bullets.
You are listening to the Hornady Podcast.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
Hey guys, before we get into today's episode, it's the first podcast of the month, and we are announcing how you can win one of these limited edition Hornady podcast t-shirts. What we want you to do, jump on Facebook, leave us a comment of an episode topic that you'd like to hear. If we pick your podcast topic, we'll send you a free t-shirt. So let us know what you want to hear and enjoy the show. Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Hornady Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Swerzik, and on today's episode, I've got a full panel. To my left, the Assistant Director of Engineering, Joe Thielen. Across the table, we've got Project Engineer Miles Neville, and then special guest Austin Orgain from Custom Rifle Barrels. Guys, thanks for coming on the show.
Good to be here. Thanks, Seth.
And I'm honored to have you guys around the table because there's one difference between me and the rest of you.
Oh, here we go.
That's competency in the precision rifle sports. You guys have done a phenomenal job of performing at a very high level. None of you higher than Austin right here. Obviously, you've found what works for you. You've trained your butt off. You've shot thousands upon thousands upon thousands of rounds downrange to get to where you are, a very accomplished shooter. And then you guys, from an employee standpoint, it's pretty darn cool, I think, to go to these PRS matches, these NRL Hunter matches, and see you guys on the podium or in the top 10, knowing that you have a 9-to-5 job and shooting matches is a very, very small portion of what we get to do for work. And I don't see many other industry company or industry personnel on the podium. Now, Austin, you're different because you own Custom Rifle Barrels and you're at the top of the podium. That's pretty cool. But as far as large, OEMs type companies, the rifle manufacturers, the other bullet manufacturers, to see a Hornady employee performing at your guys' level is pretty cool. And what I wanted to do was talk to the hefty majority of shooters, which is not you guys. You know, that upper echelon of making the top 10, let's say, is a very small percentage of shooters. There's a much larger percentage of shooters like me that are active participants, but that level of competition to get into the 50 percentile is incredibly tough. There's some things, though, that I think you guys can convey to the listener that are going to help that guy today. Like, yeah, you can get really good if you buy 6 barrels and 2,000 rounds of ammo for each barrel and just go compete and yeah, okay, well, that's years and money invested. There are some things, though, that you can implement right now, between right now and your next match, that are going to make you a better competitor, a better hunter, just a better shot in general. Some little things. And I think that's great because they're little pieces of information you can take away. And if somebody listens to this whole podcast, there's going to be something in there that they go, oh yeah, okay, yep, you know what? I'm not doing that. That's one thing I'm not doing. And if I do that, I might not be the next top 10, but I might be one place higher. I might be one impact better. That's really all we're trying to do.
It'll make me better, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we're all trying to do, whether you're teaching kids how to play T-ball or you're trying to be a better competitor or rifle shot.
That's fair enough.
Yeah. So in that vein, there's a couple things that we went over, and we just kind of threw these together. So they're in no random order, or they are in a random order. One of the more general topics, though, Miles brought this up, is just make sure that your stuff is dialed in, that your poop is in a group, that you've got reliable equipment. Now, that sounds like just a very flippant statement, but we'll get into the weeds of what we mean by that. Make sure your poop's in a group. There is some things you can do that will, when you get on stage, you will have a more successful stage. Miles, jump into what you were meaning there.
Make sure your barrel's on tight. Your scope rings are tight. Your action screws are tight. Your barrel's been cleaned in the last 1,000 rounds, maybe. Your ammunition isn't going to pop primers if it gets a little misty or rainy.
Mm-hmm.
Having new batteries in your rangefinder or your Kestrel or any of the equipment that you use, make sure when you pull it out of the bag when you get on the stage or out of the case or whatever that it is, that it's there. Make sure your bolt is assembled. I did that one wrong. I had my bolt with the cocking piece decocked show up on the first stage of a match and can't do anything. Well, there's 5 points gone that you can't get back.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
You know,
How many misfeeds have you guys seen that like do your homework on at home and make sure your mags feed well?
Yeah, that's all stuff you can do ahead of time that doesn't take any mental bandwidth when you're getting ready for a stage. This is all stuff you can do at home, off the clock, out of stress.
Yeah, it's stress. Yeah,
Go
That's a big
go
one.
through everything. So okay, my scoop rings are tight. My mount's tight to my action. Just like Miles said, my stock's tight. Everything. I want to make sure in practice that my rifle feeds and functions the way it's supposed to. I want that thing to go bang every time, right?
Yep.
And if it doesn't, then you need to fix that step in your process because that's taking a lot of mental bandwidth away from you when you're trying to compete.
Yeah. As a pilot, it sounds like a pre-flight checklist. Of
Yeah.
making sure everything is where it needs to be before you get there, because we've all seen it. You talked about the feeding issues. Now, a lot of those have been, or what I'm about to say, a lot has been corrected, but there was a lot of years where people running dashers would get up there, and it was comical. You just you wanted to play that circus music. They're trying to get this thing to feed, and they're dropping the mag and taking rounds out and putting it back in, and comical to say the least.
yeah, and it's easily preventable. Easy to
absolutely.
check out and
Yep.
get familiar with your stuff basically. But yeah, I'm a firm believer that on the order of 70 to 80% of your performance is consistent gear that makes it all the way through the match.
Yeah, reliable and consistent equipment.
Yep.
Yeah, because it's easy. I mean, it's very easy to blow a primer, blow your firing pin apart, your gun's down. There goes the rest of from where you are to the, or at least from where you are until you get a backup gun, and then you've got that whole transition of what I'm used to, what I should be running to now this new, with a whole new list of
Mm-hmm.
things that can throw you off. Like, now I got my dope mixed up between these two. Do I have dope for this gun? Blah, blah, blah. You got to get it from somebody who lends you to the
Yep.
rifle or whatever. Like just little fiascos that you can avoid.
Yeah, you said something right there. You kind of went over fast, but it's something that I see that's pretty common. Guys that run multiple guns, calibers, velocities, make sure you're on the correct profile that you're shooting at the match, because I'm guilty of this as well. You go home and you're playing with something, and then you end up switching to something else. And a lot of times your short range dope will line up pretty well, and then all of a sudden you start missing some of the long stuff. And some places the long stuff's hard to see where you're missing. You're like, oh my gosh, where am I missing? 3 or 4 stages later, you figure it out, and you're like, well, better luck next time.
Yep. Yeah, that's a big one. And you also mentioned, popping primers or if you get a little mist or whatever. That's a big one. I don't see it as common now, but there was a time where the cool thing to do was step on the throttle.
Right. Chase that 3,200 foot per second limit.
And you saw it all the time where, everything was good in the morning, and now it's 90 degrees outside, and that bolt doesn't open, or you're missing primers or whatever. Or, I know this happened to Joe, it's raining out.
You saw it, didn't you?
Yeah, and you know
that
what?
was horrible.
So
Hard lesson learned.
Yeah.
this is when
Develop your load in the winter and then go shoot in the summer in the dust and heat.
Well,
and
in this situation, it was 6.5 PRC. It was just coming out or about to come out or something like that. We were shooting a match. And, Joe, if you would have been in contention to win the match, luckily, in this case, I don't know how you placed in that one, but
I'm not very good.
you weren't in the running. You like you were in the top 10 or something. But had you been in the top 10, fighting for that, that championship spot, and then all of a sudden, oh, excuse me, you have a punch. I got my ejector stuck. I got it. Yeah. And we took your bolt apart on the hood of an ATV.
And picked that little piece of brass out of there and got the ejector plunger run.
Yep. So that's some things you can do. Reliable gear that's going to make it through a match, and that is your shooting bag. If you're going to run a tripod, NRL hunter stuff, tripod critical. Range finding binoculars, your trigger selection. Just do yourself a favor and get some reliable gear that's going to make it through an austere environment for 2 days worth of shooting.
And I'd say that's another. There's a short list of things like bolt and probably a spare bolt if you're going to get serious about this, and a spare trigger, and a spare optic or a spare rifle is.
Yeah, realistically, if you're kind of a minimalist, that's the main 3 things that can go wrong, right? Is your bolt, your trigger, and your scope. Most everything else, unless you just completely blow something up, isn't going to go down. But if you carry those 3 extra things, you pretty well get out of any situation.
That's what I always kind of scoffed at it. Like, well, if my stuff's good, I don't really need it. But then you figure how much you have invested to go to that match. It's kind of a silly thing, in the big scheme of things. If you end up make a career or whatever out of going to those matches that, continually over several years, for the money that you will waste missing a couple matches because your rifle goes down at the end of day one or whatever, a backup rifle isn't that big of a deal.
No, and I've ran into a
Most of us-
situation before where, let's say you get a bad lot of primers or something like that, and I don't run my stuff hot and it wasn't wet, but I've pierced primers in a match and had to change firing pins. But fortunately, I had an extra one with me, so you just swapped the firing pin out. Actually, it was a whole bolt, so I just swapped the whole bolt out.
Yep.
Back to rolling.
Sage advice, because if you're not, then you're dead in the water. All right, moving on to another one that is more of a general, broad topic, but I want to get your guys' specific insights on that, and that is position building. And this is one I've fallen victim to it. I'm sure everybody's fallen victim to it. You guys much less than the average competitor, and that is position building. You get into a spot where when I'm at home practicing, I always build a good position. Soon as I hear the timer start, and then
everybody's IQ drops when the timer starts.
I build a position. I know it's not the right position, and I send it anyway. So from a position building standpoint, what are some things that you can give to the listener to just take away and implement right now?
Heights get me. Like, there's some heights that are just uncomfortable, and I know, like, I do not want to shoot there if I don't have to, because I suck there.
There's a place, I guess, basically above where I can get an elbow on a knee, and below a good standing position.
High kneeling.
That is, I think, uncomfortable for everybody.
Super low kneeling and super high kneeling are the two for me, because high prone's fine, sitting's fine, normal kneeling's fine, and then low standing, high standing's all fine. But it's those two that I seem to have the most trouble with, and part of it is, especially the low kneeling, is because your stock gets so low in your shoulder.
When you're talking when you're hunched over, right?
Yeah, yes, double kneed, hunched over. Your stock's low in your shoulder, and a lot of times you'll see guys start slipping shots high. One thing that you can kind of do to mitigate that is if you're low like that, you can just drop your shoulder down in the stock a little bit. It's a little bit uncomfortable, but you just drop your shoulder down in the stock a little bit to keep that from slipping to slip shots high. That's something that I've done to be able to get around that position. Still not ideal, but sometimes you have to shoot it and you got to get by with it.
Hornady Backcountry Defense Ammunition. For those backcountry encounters when a reliable round can be a lifesaver. Backcountry Defense Ammunition is loaded with DGH bullets that feature a protected point that locks the bullet nose to the core, providing maximum penetration while limiting deflection. Stay at the top of the food chain with Backcountry Defense Ammunition from Hornady.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we brought up about position building that falls right into the age-old adage of why would I stand and shoot if I could kneel, and why would I kneel if I can lay down? What you guys talked about was, why would I bag up if I can put down a bipod?
Yeah, any position that you can put a bipod and a bag down is better. You're going to spot your shots better no matter what you're running.
Mm-hmm.
You see a lot of guys in competition now that'll bag a lot of things that you can bipod, and part of that is we run pretty heavy guns, very light recoiling guns, and you can get by with it. But fundamentally, and I think on your overall average, if you took the data, you're going to be better off with a bipod and a bag.
Yeah. Well, shooting tack, that has made that so pronounced to me. Like, I'll go up there and I'll look at a stage, and if I can figure out how to put a bipod on, I'll do it every single time.
Really?
So not because I do think it's the best thing to do, right? It is the best thing to do, but I do it because I have to. I mean, otherwise I'll get blown out, won't see as well with a bag. It's 308, right? It kicks more.
Yep.
Gun moves.
That's a takeaway if you've listened to anybody talk that competes at a high level, is they are very concerned about, can I see that shot and where it landed? And I think that's a key takeaway for the average shooter. Just really take note of what the heck is going on from the moment that bullet leaves the barrel and where it lands. And if that means you have to lower your velocity down, or if that means you need to build a better position, you need to do whatever it takes to be able to watch that bullet. And I think another thing that separates the great shooters from the good shooters is not only are they watching where they miss, they'll take that hit on the plate and make a correction within the plate. And I know I've fallen victim to, I hit somewhere, I'm going to send that wind call again and miss that second shot.
Yeah, it happens a lot. Building a good position helps with the recoil, right? It helps with recoil mitigation. You need to have some sort of a sandbag for a bag. We've tried them all. We've tried the polyfill, we've tried the light fill, and it's pretty unanimous. All of the top level and mid level shooters are running some sort of a sandbag, right?
Yeah, heavy fill.
Yeah, you want to orient the bag long ways with your stock, right?
Okay.
So that you have more contact surface area with your stock. That's going to help a lot too. And then just what you said a while ago, you get in a position and you're uncomfortable, you don't like it or whatever. Well, if you have an option to not do that, then we always say if you don't like it, don't buy it, right? You're going to burn more time trying to get comfortable and probably not breaking a good shot than if you just quickly repositioned and got in a better position and got something better, right? It might take you 4 or 5 seconds to reposition. You think, I just burned a lot of time, but you may burn 10 seconds in an uncomfortable position just trying to get steady enough
just
to
so you
break a
can
shot.
miss your shots.
Just so you can miss your shot.
Waiting for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Waiting for the wobble to line up right, so you can, jerk the trigger real quick and
Exactly.
sling it somewhere.
Well, yeah, the clock it creates so much stress internally that if you're in that position, you know it's not the right position, and you force it anyway. Now you're trying to time your wobble. All your other fundamentals be damned. Your trigger manipulation, the recoil management, your follow through is probably not going to be very good. It just sets you up for failure. Just take the time, rebuild the position so that the shots you do get off are good shots.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can't miss fast enough, right? And if say you did have to rebuild a position and you run out of time, but you took 8 good shots, well, you might have took 10 shots and only got 6 hits the other way because you didn't build a good position and you weren't steady. So, as far as hit percentage wise, it's way in score wise in general. You'd rather get the 8 for 8 than even the 8 for 10. Because that builds confidence within yourself and in your mind. Then you start being able to see building your position and building a steady position where you don't have all this wobble in your crosshair and stuff like that, and you're breaking good shots every time. Some people just need to step back and forget about the clock even at a match and just go, I'm going to build however many positions that I can and break however many really good shots that I can within the time limit. And if I time out at shot number 7, I don't care as long as I took 7 good shots.
Right.
Then you start building really good habits. Then speed comes, right? You're gonna speed up quickly because you're gonna get used to building, even just stepping back and analyzing a stage and going, okay, I need to build this position here, this position here, this position here. Once you start learning that, then it's when you get on the stage, you think about it ahead of time when you're on the stage, that's just second nature, and that's where you make up your time, is in your transitions, not shooting fast. Can't shoot fast enough, right?
Right.
You want to move fast and then shoot slow.
All right. That's a takeaway from position building.
It's all about the efficiency in
fast.
between shots.
Move fast,
not how fast
shoot
you
slow.
can shoot.
Prioritize doing it right before doing it fast.
That's right. That's exactly right. You see a lot of guys put out videos and maybe even do some training stuff that they're like, okay, you need to build this first position and get this first shot off in 10 seconds. You need to do that. Well, no, you don't, because all that's going to do is build a bad habit. You're probably going to build a bad position, and you're for sure going to break a rushed or bad shot to try to hurry up and get that shot off.
Yep.
I don't care if it takes you 20 seconds to get in position and take that first shot. If you built a really good position and took a really good shot, that's the goal. That is how you get to be better and get to be more consistent. Is breaking good shots every single time.
That what you just said. In the archery world, that's a really good way to develop target panic.
It's in the rifle world too. I would almost guarantee you that we get a lot of students, and you see a lot of people that their shots aren't hitting consistently in the same spot with consistent conditions. And I guarantee you, if you put a trigger cam on and watch them, they're sweeping the trigger as they're coming across a target with target panic.
Yep.
They're like, I got to get that right. But because they're not used to building the good position, they're not used to their reticle not moving in a good position.
Yeah.
If you build a good position this is on a solid prop, but if you build a good position, your reticle shouldn't move.
Right.
It should be like you're shooting prone, breaking a shot.
And
that'll get rid of the target.
That was, I think, from me being maybe upper middle pack to getting into the top 10 was just the realization, somebody saying, if your reticle's moving on the target, you're doing it wrong. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, I'll go figure out how.
I would agree with that statement 100%.
I'll go figure out how to do that because
Yeah.
that's
Show me how to make this crosshair not move.
right.
Absolutely.
That's cool. Miles, you mentioned something before we started recording in regard to position building, which I thought was unique in that you basically take the same approach to building a position, and it's the same position. You just have to identify the height.
Yeah, that's what I'm most of the time. I mean, there's other, on certain pieces of machinery or whatever, farm machinery, there's stuff that's in your way. Not always exactly that simple, but most of it comes down to it's this far off the ground. The barricade, whatever prop is this far off the ground, or this far off the ground, or that far off the ground, and how do you approach that? So when I see that, I know that's prone. Okay, no, that's going to be kneeling. Now that's in that weird spot. I don't know. I'll have to feel it out when I get for sure standing. But knowing that cuts out a lot of. If I see something that's going to be a high kneeling position, I'm not gonna try to I'm not gonna waste time trying to set up a lower position. I guess having that familiarization to know what I'm doing before I get there saves me time from having to do it twice.
You have a plan going into it. You look at what the stage is. You identify the heights. You know, okay, with this level of height, this is my go-to position. I'm going to hit that one. I'm going to hit that one. This one I might have to fill out when I get there, but you have a plan going into it.
Yep.
All right.
And I think a good practice barricade, if you don't have it or if you can make your own stuff or whatever, even if you do it in your house just for dry fire practice, is just a stair stepper. Because then you get a step every 8 inches or whatever you want to do, but then you can see every so often up and down, get a good feel for what a good position looks like at all those different
Ladders work well.
I use a folding ladder.
Yeah, I do too. Almost everybody has a folding ladder, and you can get the different heights.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that the base is pretty solid because you can get a lot of wobble out of a folding ladder, and that's kind of hard. But sometimes you need to shoot off of something that's wobbly because we have to in the real world, right?
Sure.
Hunting and in competition.
Yep.
We always find ourselves having to shoot off of a tree branch or a rock or something to get the height that you need in a certain situation.
Or in the hunting situation, one of the positions that I shoot a lot off a tripod, but is that high prone where you're like, okay, I can go prone here, but I have to get my chest up off
above
the
the grass.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's can be a tough one, but if you practice it, you can get good as well.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. So another one I have, this one's more Hornady related, but one of the things that I think will, if you do this correctly, you will do better at every match, especially when you start shooting matches all over the country. This is set up and trust a zero angle with Hornady Fordoff. And Miles, I know dyed-in-the-wool Joe, I know you as well. Walk us through why a zero angle is going to be an advantage to the competitor.
So zero range, although it's typical, like most people zero at 100 yards. That's a pretty typical thing. Zero range at 100 yards does not change dramatically through temperature, humidity, and elevation swings, but it can move a little bit. Zero angle basically pulls, when you set up a zero angle for your rifle, it pulls your current point of impact, velocity, bullet profile, and environmental data and back calculates the exit vector of the bullet relative to the center line zero line of sight of your optic and finds the angle between those two things. So that's what we're talking about when we say zero angle.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one physically possible way for that to do that with the physics and math involved, right? And so what it does is it pulls back exactly that relationship. That relationship doesn't change with temperature, humidity, altitude, pressure, anything. So it tends to be a much more reliable zeroing factor, because then now that rigid mechanical angle is pulled through all of your calculations no matter where you go in the world.
Right. That's a big one. And I think one of the things with zero range and, when you compare it to a zero angle, what you just said is true of zero range, where it'll vary some, but maybe not a ton. That's subject to your shot sample and what you did to establish that 100-yard zero. Because if you sling 3 shots and call it a day and start running it out, the odds that those 3 shots are perfectly zeroed at 100 yards, very slim.
Compared to the total population, what you're going to shoot throughout the match or whatever. Yeah. And then the other thing that people will say, well, it's like, tenth of an inch, 100 yards, who cares? Because you can run the math. You can set up a zero angle, run it, at this temperature, this altitude, run it all the way up. Well, that tenth of an inch, I mean, that carries out and that projects everything that you do downrange, and it adds to all the other errors that you have through different lighting, different wind conditions. So all those things, different shot placement, right? So if you hit the edge of a plate, right, that was a miss. Now, if your zero is that much off at 100 yards, but then now, that much off at 400 yards, well, if you're barely winging it, that's a miss. And in the competitive realm of this, a couple points over the course of a match, that's the difference, right?
Yep.
A lot of times.
Yeah, and to me, your zero distance, like at 100 yards, your lighting angle can affect that so
Of
much.
course.
So you can get so many times you see it, you can get a false zero, right?
Yep.
Because of the lighting angle.
Yeah. And you can get a false zero from wind speed and direction,
That's
which
right,
we didn't talk about yet either.
Yeah, exactly. So that's and in part of that finding zero angle, it back calculates all the aerodynamic jump and everything, right? So I guess I glossed over that, but yeah, if you do have wind input, you put that wind input when you calculate your zero angle, and if it's windy, it doesn't matter if it's 2 mile an hour straight from your back. You put it into forward off, and when you calculate your zero angle, it will take that into account and correct for it.
Because that's a big one that I don't think people quite appreciate. If you zero your rifle, let's say in a 7 to 10 mile an hour wind, which is really common in most parts of the country, you zero your rifle in that condition and you're running a zero range, just by turning around 180 degrees and shooting the other direction, that can make a noticeable difference to your zero, like a measurable. And I'm not talking like maybe a tenth of an inch. That could be 3, 4, 5/10 of an inch. And so, the zero angle captures all of that. So
the other thing too is you like what you were talking about with lighting. You can set a zero angle at 300 yards, so you can basically rough zero your optic at 100, and then shoot at 300. And okay, well, it took me 1.27 mils to get to 300. I plug that into my zero angle calculator. It comes back calculates, and then you can run it back to 100 and verify, and it should be very close to zero at 100 if you already rigidly zeroed your scope at 100. But then, that just gives you a little bit more resolution on the math that you're doing for.
Yeah, and I like the 300 yard anyway because, the verification at 300, because your depth of field is deeper, your parallax doesn't have to be as exact, your lighting conditions aren't as effective.
Yep.
Yeah, the parallax can definitely mesh up at 100.
Yeah, you get a lot truer zero angle set, I think.
Yep.
And I tell people too all the time, like you have, all the lens assemblies in your optic, and then the other lens is all the air in between you and the target. And if most of your shooting is going to be 400 to 1,200 yards, it probably makes a little bit of sense to zero a little further out.
Yeah. And I think I would add, that's great. Miles summed it up, but I know that people, the biggest thing that I see traveling around and shooting is I don't think people shoot their rifle enough at, I don't care if it's 100, 300, 600. I know you like 600. I like 600 too. Shoot your rifle enough to make sure how good your rifle shoots and that your dope is good.
Yeah.
I mean, I see it so many times. You get there and the guy's like, man, I don't know what happened. I shot this and now I'm low all the time and I got to add a tenth or 2/10 or whatever. And it's like, man, by the time you show up here, you should.
Yeah.
And
should
have
all of
tuned
that
up.
could be encompassed by an improperly zeroed rifle. If you're a tenth low, 2/10 low all the way out, and you thought you had a good 5-shot zero at 100, and then you drove 300 miles to go to this match, and you show up different wind, speed, direction.
That's definitely something that I watch other people do that I haven't had happen to me in a long time, is jacking with muzzle velocity and BC or zero or whatever.
You see so many people that shoot 400 yards or even 300 yards. They're like, my velocity's off, or my BC needs to go different. It's like, hold on, now wait a minute.
Yeah,
and changing stuff throughout the match, and it's this, and they're when they are in your squad, you watch them throughout the whole match, changing things every few stages,
they're chasing it all the time.
Well, and there's money attached to all of that. Every time you pull the trigger, it costs you money, whether you're shooting factory or a hand load. Unless you've got some sort of, unless you're a youth shooter and your parents are covering it all, there's a cost to that. And when you show up the day before the match and you spend 10 or 15 shots just to confirm and re-zero your rifle, if you set up with zero angle and you do it right, those confirmation shots can go from 10 or 15 to 1, and then you can stretch it out and confirm dope at longer ranges, make sure everything's fiddle string tight, and you're ready to go to the match.
And there's things that happen. You can bump a barrel around in the action, right? If you hit it hard enough, you can bump optics around. Like, there are things that can ruin your zero.
And we're not saying to not verify.
Right. It's worth it to verify. But yeah, that's something like once you get a good solid zero set, that should not be moving on you day to day, place to place.
Look at this. 100 free bullets when I buy these select Hornady reloading tools. Wow, 500 free bullets with certain Hornady reloading presses and kits. Well, what do they have? Let's get loaded.
There's no better time to stock your reloading bench. Choose from the most durable, precise, and convenient tools on the market and receive free bullets to get you loaded. Visit Hornady.com for further details.
Next time we get loaded, I'm buying.
And I think just to sum it all up in regard to zero angle, we've talked about this a lot on our Ford Off podcast, that, on our Quinlan's Corner and our Neville's Nook episodes. Yeah, what we really advocate, more is better in this scenario, and generally the saying isn't more is better is better. And in this case, a 20-shot zero angle done properly can just set yourself up for success throughout the longevity of that barrel when you're shooting that load. And it seems like you're shooting a lot, like a 20-shot zero, but a 20-shot zero angle will pay it for itself.
Save, yeah. That's what I do. I don't know how much you shoot, Austin, but like before I'll go to a match, I will make sure and go shoot at 400, 600, 800. And I'm not talking shooting a shot or two, like shoot groups at those distances and then measure where those are and compare them to your dope and make sure that your zero angle or your dope is spot on.
A question we get a lot is if you only had 40 rounds to prep for a match, what would you do with it? And my pretty much unanimously, our answer is I'm going to go make sure my gun is lined out. And if it takes all 40 rounds, then that's what my practice was.
Absolutely.
If it takes me 15 rounds or 10 rounds to do it, then that's fine. Then I've got a few extra rounds I can practice with. But the main thing is to make sure that your data is right and your zero is right.
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, I usually try to shoot 4 to 5 shot groups at each distance. It's still a small sample size, but it's big enough to be more than just a 2-shot or 3-shot.
But time you sum all those, that's
right.
my
That's
point
right.
is, yes, I may only be shooting 4, 5, 6, 8 shots at this yard line, but I do it 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
Now I've shot 20 shots.
Yeah.
At each, I've shot 20 shots confirming the same thing.
That's exactly what I do. Normally, whenever I load and I'm fixing to actually load for a match before I do, I'm going to verify everything is doing what I want to. I'll load 15 to 20 rounds, and I'll shoot at least 3 distances. On my particular range, I got 665. So I got 500, 665, and 895. And I'll shoot those 3 distances, make sure that my one rifle is grouping well at those distances, and that my elevation is tracking at those distances. And then all I have to do is go load my ammo and get ready for it.
Absolutely. Because I tell guys all the time, I'm like, I'm fighting enough stuff here, trying to keep track of all this. One thing I can't be worried about is, well, is my gun, is it off? Is it a 10th? That's part I can't be worried about.
And that's, a shameless plug for Ford Off in general. When you see people really struggle busting, wheels are falling off, and they're fudging velocity, and they're fudging BC, and they're fuzzing their zero range, and they're finger banging this Kestrel like crazy. It's like you don't have to do that. There's better ways. Yeah.
Well, and a lot of that comes back to a guy that just shot 400 yards and go, I'm 2 high at 400 yards. I need to shave some velocity. It's like, well, you're going to shave 150 feet a second or what? Yeah. Because that's what it's going to take at that distance, especially with the efficient bullets that we're running now, right? It's just, your velocity doesn't have as much of a factor at that 400-yard range.
Right. All right, moving on to another tip, another shameless plug. This one, though, more nuanced, more in the minutia, and one thing that we've seen this happen. We've lived this. If you want to just pick up just another hit, just another, 1 or 2 hits per match, I'm telling you what, switching to an A-tip, that can do it. Just switching to an A-tip from what you're currently using can get you another hit or 2 per match. And one, they're just more ballistically efficient, right? So they're not going to be as sensitive to your wind call, a wind change during the stage, or your range. If you say NRL hunter, you got like a miss range by a couple yards. You're going to be less sensitive to that. But the big one with the A-tip and our ELD match, is the DVRT, that drag variability reduction technology. And that's something that we spent years perfecting, and now we were able to get that patented. So your shot to shot to shot to shot drag variation is as low as it's going to be from any bullet out there. And you have a cone of fire, and your bullets are going to land somewhere within that cone of fire. And having this DVRT in the A-tip, your cone of fire will be smaller, especially at those extended range where your flight time is significantly longer. You know, I'm talking those half-mile plus distance shots. You're going to pick up another hit or two every match you go to just by shooting an A-tip.
Sure.
That sounds like marketing drivel, bunch of Hornady BS because we're just a marketing team. That's really all Hornady is just marketing. We actually don't even make bullets.
Secret's out.
That's what that sounds like. But I'm here to tell you it's reality.
No, I mean,
I see it practically. I see it in the field all the time. Like the drag variability on it is great. Your vertical dispersion at distance, whenever your velocity numbers are tracking, you just don't get any vertical dispersion.
I mean, that's my job, right? A lot of times, day in, day out, is go out to the range and shoot groups and shoot drag profile on bullets. And we shoot competitor bullets. We shoot things within our product line. We have bowtail hollow points. We have the same types and shapes of stuff that's out there. And yeah, unanimously, ELDMs now have DVRT as well, and A-tips outperform.
Well, the whole ELD family, we should clarify.
ELDM, ELDX, and then the ELDVTs.
and CXs.
Right. Yep. So they all have that technology in them. And I've seen enough of it now. It's like, I mean, you can call it a marketing thing if you want, but that's what I'm shooting for long range. Like,
just numbers, right? It's physics.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're basically limited by the consistency of the downrange air density. Yeah,
which is pretty impressive.
Right. Like, I don't think you're going to get, like you see choppy, gusty days, you see a little bit more drag variability, but it's across the board, right? And then within the bullet selection, it's always top of the line is those bullets.
Yeah.
Well, and that's as a top level competitor and somebody that wants to compete better, that's what you're looking for, right? There's so many variabilities in long range shooting in general that the more things you can eliminate, the better off you're going to be.
100%.
If you can eliminate drag, if you can eliminate your extreme spreads on your velocities, you can eliminate breaking bad shots. All this stuff we're talking about is ways to improve rounds on target, whether it's hunting or match shooting.
Yep. Each little thing adds up, and you start chinking your way into the inside of the ring.
Just like anything else, you're building a race car, you're shooting PRS, whatever it is. There's some things you can do that just take big swaths at it. I mean, the lion's share. Then you start to pare that down, and you start getting to be better and better and better, and things get harder and harder to find. And now we're picking at hair's hair. But the DVRT, that is a real technology, that it is patented, and it actually works. And I can say, seeing the initial, I was working with Jaden at the time when this initial stuff was going on, and then to move over into marketing, and before it became patented, I was always talking to Joe and Jaden about what's going on. I know Joe sent out some bullets, some A-tip bullets to people like you and others, and the answer was like, I don't know what you did to these, but there is no vertical dispersion,
and I want more.
Yeah,
that's what you guys told us.
Yeah.
You're like,
how many can you send?
We need some more of those. Those in 2019.
I shot those. 18? So I was talking about my targets. I have an IPSC target at 895 yards, and whenever I knew I was good, I would put 6 shots on the head at 895 yards.
That's dialed in.
That's what I would shoot. I'd shoot at the hook, and I'd get 6 shots on the head. And I'm like, okay, we're good to go.
Yeah.
The high-speed 3-in-1 power case trimmer keeps up with your need for speed. Trimming, chamfering, and deburring 25 cases a minute. Built to handle a rush without compromising on precision. The ultimate tool for high-volume loaders. Set trim length quickly with macro adjustments and fine-tune with the Click Adjust micro dial. The high-speed 3-in-1 power case trimmer from Hornady.
Yeah, that is drag variability reduction technology at work. You're not getting the vertical dispersion. You're smaller groups at longer ranges, and you're picking up some of those hits at those long targets that you simply would miss if your bullet had more variability.
Right. Sure.
So, yeah, shoot DVRT bullets, specifically that A-tip. I mean, that one, we know it's an expensive bullet, but the best isn't cheap. and it is the best out there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially if you want to improve your score, if you're wanting to compete at a higher level, I mean, that's what you got to do.
And you get the bonus of a shot marker.
Yeah.
You get a
Impact
nice
marker.
spark a lot of times too.
Yeah, you do get a little bit of a
Yeah.
spark. That is a good point, though. Earlier in the podcast, we addressed, Austin had mentioned about seeing your impact and making those micro corrections, even on your impacts, not just your misses. And the A-tip does, it gives you a pretty signature.
Yeah, leave a really nice shiny mark on it most of the time.
Yep. So that's pretty handy to make those micro corrections. Now, our last recommendation for how to be just to go out and be a better shooter, another shameless plug, but one that you guys can attest to, is go take a JTAC shooting class.
Yeah.
So let's talk briefly JTAC, what it is, where you're at, what you do.
So starting off, JTAC is just an acronym for Justin Watts, Tate Streeter, myself, Austin Orgain, and then Clay Blackadder. Since then, we have also added Austin Bushman. He kind of interchanges with Tate. Tate's pretty busy with his kids and can't make some of the classes now. But, all top-level shooters, we've been doing the class for, I don't even know now, 4 years?
At least, because I'm
Maybe 5?
I think I'm 4 years removed from
Yeah,
the first
probably
one
so.
I did.
So it might have been doing the class for 5 years. Well received. In the class we don't hold anything back, right? We do about half a day in the classroom. We tell you everything that we know, in theory of what we know, and then when we go to the actual range, we show you. We help you build that position. We help you get to the point where there's no wobble in your reticle. We'll help you where you're breaking good shots, and then from then we progress to being able to see those shots. And it's kind of like we say, if we, for, let's say, a mid-pack shooter, what could you do if we could get 1 point every other stage? If we could teach you a way to get 1 point every other stage, what does that do for you? 10 points over a weekend, that's a big swing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's call it 1 point every third stage. That's still 5 points. That's still a big swing for the weekend. And it's especially if you already have the fundamentals, that some of the small things about position building, spotting shots on target, spotting misses too, because a lot of people are afraid to correct to the center of the target. But he wants to correct to the edge of the target.
Oh, yeah.
And then all you're doing is shooting at the edge of the target at that point, right?
Yep.
But it's a hard measuring point. So people mentally are like, okay.
Guilty
I wanna be
as
over here.
charged.
Or
100%.
it's always just I missed. I better move over a 10th. Yeah, I better move over a 10th. And then you pretty much miss in the same spot.
Yeah.
I better move over a 10th. And you miss in the same
All
spot.
tenths matter, but only if you missed a 10th off of center.
Yeah, that's right. And very rarely do we shoot at a 2/10 wide target. So very
Right.
rarely is that the correction. So, we go over all that in class, and guaranteed we will make you a smarter shooter. You don't always have to be better than the other guy. You just got to be smarter.
That's wisdom right there.
It is, so I went.
So yeah, I was going to say, Joe, you're the success story out of this deal. Is why
I just,
one of the reasons I brought this up, because Joe, you were a good competitor. You had your head on square. All your equipment was dialed in tight. Yeah. Everything was good.
I was a smart competitor.
But you were
Did my homework.
not on the podium.
Oh, absolutely, not even close.
Okay, so what
Not even
happened?
close. So number one, I hated positional shooting. I was scared of it. Positional stage. Oh crap! I'm gonna
Yard sale.
Gonna bleed points here. I mean, I knew it, right? That was my mental prep for that. I'll do my best, but I hate positional shooting. Prone, I'm great. I like it. I'm good. So
Me too.
So I would talk to these guys and they'd be like, nope, you shoot positionally, your gun should, Austin, how much of that target were you using? He'd look at me kind of funny, or Clay or whoever. He'd be like, what do you mean? How much is your dot move on that target when you shoot? How are you getting them centered? Are you good at just timing it? He's like, whoa. Your reticle should not move on that target. Well, hold on here, because mine moves.
Are you sure? Yeah.
Yeah. So with a few things that they'll show you of how to hold your gun, how to put your bag down with a purpose was maybe might have been the biggest one. And now it's ooh, a positional stage, great. Is the prop steady? Yep. Stable prop.
Oh, yeah.
I'm good to go.
Now you look at it and you're like, oh, easy points.
You do. You really do. Now you're it's the long ball pro stages where you're like, all right, I got to be dialed in here to see.
Because for the most part, your positional stages, the targets are usually slightly bigger and usually a little closer. And then when you build a good position, now this is given a solid prop, right? If you're shooting off a piece of plywood or something like that,
chains or
yeah, you're gonna have some movement in your reticle, and then you're gonna have to. It's good to practice that because then you do have to time your shot and you have to time the wobble in your reticle. And it sucks, but we do have to shoot some of those. Or you run tripod rear support if you have to.
2 thumbs down.
I hate doing it, but sometimes you just have to. But given a steady prop, whatever, pipes in the ground, rocks, rocks and trees are very popular things to shoot off of. And for the most part, those are pretty steady. You should be able to build a position that your reticle is not moving when you decide you want to break that trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you can break 100% shot. And here's something I tell people too, because everybody's worried about being able to manage the recoil in it, and they want to press into the rifle a lot, and then you get the shake and you're inducing wobble. And I say, okay, what's better? Is it better to break a shot with your crosshair moving and see where you missed, or is it better to break a 100% shot with your crosshairs not moving and not see where you missed?
I want the 100% shot.
Because the 100% shot, at least you can correct something.
Yep.
Right? Because if I'm wobbling, what do I correct? I don't know. Because did I miss because the wind was going, or did I miss because my crosshair was moving all over the target? I don't know.
There is no correction.
But now, if I broke the shot with no wobble and I don't see anything, it's like, well, I've done all my homework on getting my data. My elevation, I'm fairly certain is good. So now I just have to correct one where the other wins. So now I just gave myself a 50-50 chance essentially to get that next round.
Versus if you're doing it the other way, you got a 50-50 chance, but a 100% chance that you choose the wrong thing.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah. So because you're like, oh gosh, is it wind or was it wobble?
Yeah, and I still have the piece of paper on my computer. It's in my office. You guys have probably seen it. It says, I always take the time to correct the center of the target. Because I was so guilty of that. I'm like, oh, I missed left. I'll just move over a 10th or 2. Yeah. And then you're almost certain to be like, well, how did I miss again? Well,
you drill a hole.
Yeah, digging a hole.
Yeah. I've done that.
Somebody will come off the line and be like, man, you missed off the right side every single time. It's like, well, I was moving over.
Just a little bit.
At a time.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, take it, obviously JTAC, we're going to, support you guys. We're going to recommend your class. There's a lot of other good classes out there. Yeah. And so the shameless plug, obviously, for JTAC because Austin's here. But in general, this isn't something you can apply right now today to be a better shooter tomorrow. But if you're going to go into this and you want to give it your best effort, there are people who have spent their time and their money and their resources to fail so much that they learned how to do it the right way. You can go take a class from them and they'll teach you how to do it the right way.
That's right. And a lot of people don't want to do it because it seems expensive, but this is an expensive sport. I mean, for what you will spend in one weekend going and shooting a match and potentially building bad habits and doing it wrong, you could just spend on a weekend taking a good quality class and learning what you're doing wrong.
Yep.
It's your money ahead to go learn from other people's mistakes. I mean, there's 5 of us that have shot, I don't know what our total combined years are now, but for years and years and years, and we've all figured out something different from one another. But really, when we came together and started this class, we had figured a lot of this stuff out on our own, and turns out it was a lot of the same stuff that we figured out, without being with each other. And then we were able to combine all of our knowledge and the little things that Justin figured out or Clay figured out, now we could share with each other. And it just made it really
best
quality class.
It's the best money you will ever spend.
Yeah.
If you're serious about
it, it's the best money.
Even just shooting in general. Like I said, we had a class recently that we had a young kid that was local to us that he just was kind of wanting to get into it. Didn't really know what he was doing so much and wanted to kind of learn and came to the class. And honestly, the class he came to was a little bit more of an advanced class. Probably a lot of it was over his head, but he was able to figure out how to build a position shooting his rifle. He was shooting a factory rifle, built a position, figured out, that he could get good quality Hornady ammo and hit targets with his factory rifle. Now he can take that home and go coyote hunt with it, deer hunt with it. Now he can be more confident in taking that 300 or 400 yard shot at a coyote or a deer, and just all from a 1 weekend class that he got to come shoot and have fun and hang out with like-minded people, and just learn. So.
Money well spent.
Yeah.
Awesome, guys. Is there any last minute stuff that came to mind that you want to leave the listener with, a little nugget of information to just take away, help them make them a better shooter?
Got one more thing.
Uno más.
Every PRS match, they usually give you a stage book.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of every stage, every target that you miss, write down exactly why you missed it.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the match, thumb through that, and you'll see real quick what you suck at.
That is very true.
Yeah,
Also
it's good because you want to have a short memory on that stuff, right? You don't want to dwell on the bad stuff.
Yep.
But you also want to learn from the bad stuff. So that's a great idea, is just go,
Bad wind call.
I didn't hold over if it was a holdover type stage. Whatever, just write it down. Then forget about it, move on. Mental focus goes on to the next stage. After the match is over, when you don't need to worry about, okay, what do I need to work on?
That's a great point that collectively you guys said was write it down. And then, like you said, short-term memory is clutch. And that's key for anything, a lot of us here at the round table, athletes in our prior day, like having short-term memory was crucial in the moment. Like you can't play that next play to your full capacity if you're dwelling on the last one. And by writing it down, taking 2 seconds, write this note, move on with your life. It's done now. You can let that go. And when you have the mental capacity to circle back, you circle back. But that's like a good physical thing that can turn your mental status away from that.
Well, and you could take that to the next practice session, right? Because if I flip through my book and I have 3 stages where I undercorrected, let's say. Now, whenever I go to the range and I want to practice, let's say I wrote down, broke a bad shot positionally, right, on 3 stages in this match. Whenever I go to my next practice session, even if it's only 20 rounds, I'm not going to go out there and just shoot prone a little bit and kind of piddle around and shoot the barricade or whatever. I'm going to go, okay, I need to practice on my positional shooting and building a good position and breaking 100% shot, because 3 times at this match, which may equate to more than 3 points, I didn't break a good shot. And that's there's no excuse for that other than I got lazy or got complacent or I just got really dumb when the clock started. And that's something that I can go work on in practice and in practice with a purpose. It doesn't even take that many rounds. You don't have to burn 1,000 rounds, in practice every month to improve on that. You just need to practice with a purpose.
Yeah, and I would leave the listener with what's worked really good for me. It dovetails onto you guys is for every hour I spend at a match, I spend at least that much time, if not more, at home. I call it seat time. Learning, whether I'm practicing, reading my book, it doesn't matter. Making sure my bolts are all tight and all that kind of stuff. So do your homework at home.
Yeah, and that doesn't cost you anything.
Doesn't cost exactly.
No, neither does dry fire. That's a big one.
So it's been 3-4 years ago, but I would spend a fair amount of time driving out to Lexington where we used to shoot radar and stuff, but they've got a nice range there. And I would take 50 rounds, and I'd spend most of a Saturday there. And that's
50 rounds.
With 50 rounds, right? And that's a lot of dry fire, a lot of building positions.
It's really good to mix it in. To your note on dry fire, I think dry fire is great, and I think there's a lot of stuff you can practice on dry fire, but at the same time, you need some live fire in there because you can't emulate recoil and spotting shots. Now, things you can practice with dry fire is you can practice your position building 100%. You can practice going through the steps to build a position and break a good shot every single time.
Why is my reticle still wobbling?
Yeah,
and then you don't
that's
have to
great for dry fire. But as far as an actual practice, you need to be able to mix some live fire in to be able to for that recoil impulse to happen. How do I manage the recoil in the positions that I'm building, and how am I spotting my shots, whether it be misses or whether it be on plate? Because those are where you pick up points.
And that live fire is critical because you guys, I want to say I think it was Clay that told me, he's like, look, man, just chill out and come talk to me in 2 years when you've watched 2,000 bullets go down range at matches. Not doing other stuff at matches. As far as when you're really trying to see where your bullets are landing. That's been that, as much as I hate to admit it, that's been pretty sound advice. You have to watch shots go down range. So when guys shooting, get on your scope and be watching.
Yep.
That's free
information. We always say that at our classes. If we feel pretty tuned up after a class, especially if we have a match the next weekend, because we just got to see 2,000 rounds go down range. Because we're watching students shoot. Most of the time, we already know what they're doing and what they're thinking and where they're correcting, as they're shooting without even asking them. And then you can kind of talk to them about it afterwards. But we've just watched it and done it so much, and it helps us see how plates react. See that reaction, that bullet start hitting the plate, where the plate's going to swing, how the dust puffs off of it. And that tunes us up mentally and visually to be able to just watch rounds go down range.
Excellent, guys. Well, with that, I appreciate you guys sharing some of your insight on just how to be a better shooter, whether that be a hunter or a competitor. We geared a lot of this towards the competitor, but there's a lot of crossover. You want to be the best nut behind the bolt that you can be, and hopefully some of this was helpful. And again, thank you guys for coming on the show.
Absolutely.
No problem.
All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Hornady Podcast. I hope that at least one of these was helpful, that you can implement to become a better shooter. We appreciate you listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.